Every morning before the museum opened, Frida Vogel took a slow walk through the exhibition rooms, greeting her charges like old acquaintances. The Teddy Roosevelt bear from 1903 received a straightening of his tiny pince-nez. The tinplate steamboat obtained a dab of oil on its brass rudder. When she reached the newest display, a glass vitrine labelled Wind-Up Wonders of the Weimar Era, she paused longest. At its centre stood a walnut music box no bigger than a paperback, carved with ivy scrollwork and fitted with a brass crank. The wooden lid bore a single gilt initial, K. "Guten Morgen, Kleine," Frida murmured. She wound the crank once, purely out of habit, and the box responded with a chiming waltz that drifted under the vaulted ceiling. Rich, melancholic, almost too complicated for a toy. "Well, that beats coffee," Lena Hartman said, appearing behind her supervisor. The graduate student balanced 2 paper cups, offering one. "I spent half the night researching the composer. No luck, it isn't listed in any catalogue." "It might not be published," Frida replied, closing the glass. "The donor claimed his grandfather wrote it." "The mysterious Herr Kranz," Lena said. "He gave us the box and vanished to Switzerland the next day. Typical." She took a sip, then frowned at the vitrine. "Did you wind it yesterday, before we left?" "No." Frida straightened. "Why?" "Because when I locked the hall at 6, the mainspring was fully relaxed. Now it's tight again." They traded a glance. Toys did not wind themselves. Outside, Kurfürstenstrasse was waking to a drizzly march, but inside, beneath Art Deco skylights, the Berlin Museum of Childhood Curiosities held its breath. An hour later, the public arrived. Toddlers tugging parents, collectors clutching notebooks. Frida stationed herself at the ticket desk, while Lena demonstrated wind-up trains on a loop of track. The hush that had unsettled them earlier dissolved into the pleasant clatter of tin wheels. Shortly before noon, Inspector Marcus Dietz of the Berlin police stepped through the doorway, rain beading on his coat. His appearance, taller than the case of Marienkäfer scooters, caused the schoolchildren to scatter like marbles. "Frau Vogel," he said, "may we talk?" Frida led him to her cramped office, where catalogue cards spilled like confetti. Dietz declined coffee, preferring to stand. "Have you read the papers?" he asked. "I've been here since 7. Last night, someone broke into the engineering firm Klug and Bauer in Moabit. Their safe was emptied, schematics for a new prosthetic joint, plus the international patent applications. No signs of forced entry on the safe itself. Management believes the thief knew the combination." Frida waited for the question. "We traced a partial footprint in their loading bay," Dietz continued. "It matches a vintage leather sole only manufactured until 1930, a collector's shoe. We happen to know a man who collects such things, Otto Krantz. He is also your donor." Lena, eavesdropping from the doorway, blurted, "But Herr Krantz loves toys, not industrial espionage." "Love and money are old partners," Dietz replied. "Krantz left Berlin early this morning. If he took the patents, he needs a way to pass them to a buyer or hide them securely. A safe is ideal, provided you remember the code. Unfortunately, numbers can be forgotten." Frida touched the papers on her desk. "Are you suggesting the music box contains the combination?" "That is one possibility." Dietz straightened his cuffs. "I'll need the item for analysis." The curator's stomach tightened. Removing an artifact so soon after acquisition threatened the whole spring exhibition. Yet an official order was an official order. She nodded, and the inspector signed a receipt. That evening, the museum closed at 6. Rain rattled against mullioned windows as Frida drew metal grates over the entrance. She crossed the darkened hall toward the vitrine. It should have been empty, but the music box was back in place, its carved ivy glistening under emergency lights. She froze. Dietz had taken it 2 hours ago. Footsteps tapped behind her. Lena emerged from shadows, holding a small toolkit. "I borrowed your keys. Don't be angry." "How did you—" "The inspector's driver stopped for currywurst before the precinct," Lena said, cheeks flushed. "I walked by, saw the box on the back seat, and I liberated it." Frida pressed a hand to her temples. "You committed theft from the police." "I committed preservation of cultural property," Lena corrected. "If Kranz encoded a crime inside this melody, we need to understand it before it vanishes into an evidence locker. We have 1 night." Frida exhaled, torn between discipline and curiosity. Finally, she said, "Lock the doors properly, then meet me in the conservation lab." The lab smelled of wax and camphor. Lena placed the music box on a felt pad, while Frida fetched calipers, a stethoscope, and a portable recorder. They wound the crank once. The cylinder rotated, plucking teeth of the steel comb, each note ringing pure as a cathedral bell. Lena closed her eyes. "Hear that? The tune modulates after 12 bars, then returns to the tonic. But the second time, certain notes change, almost like a code." Frida recorded the piece 3 times, then loaded the waveforms onto her laptop, scrolling the spectrogram. Colored peaks resembled mountain ranges. "We can assign each pitch a digit," she said. "C equals 1, D equals 2, and so on." They transcribed the melody's first pass, 1, 2, 5, 1, 4, 3, 5, 1. The variation on the repeat produced 3 to 6, 1, 4, 1, 2, 6, 4. "2 sets of numbers," Lena whispered. "Perhaps 2 safes." "Or 2 halves of a combination," Frida replied. "Some vaults require sequential codes." She opened a drawer and removed the museum's own safe log. It listed the day's takings locked downstairs. The combination was 6 digits, 180409. She underlined the pattern, 1804009. "Look, ours contains zeros, but the music box doesn't produce a 0. That's expected. Musical notes run 1 to 7. Kranz must substitute a rest or sustain." Lena replayed the recording, tapping on the desk during pauses. They discovered rests after 2 specific notes. Assigning 0 to rests produced 12504351. The second set yielded 361402264. 16 digits, too long for a standard safe. Frida thought aloud. Maybe we interleave them. She wrote them in 2 columns and read across. 1326510440325614. 163K quadrillion possibilities if random, Lena said, impressed. "But patterns emerge. Every 4th digit is 4 or 0. She highlighted them. Kranz could derive a simpler 8-digit code by taking every other digit. They worked until midnight amid magnifying lamps and tick-ticking metronomes. Eventually, Frida leaned back. If Kranz indeed robbed Klugenbauer, he hasn't delivered the patents yet. The theft only happened last night. That means the receiver is still in Berlin. "Someone familiar with vintage toys," Lena said. "Maybe one of our regulars." Frida recalled a man who visited 2 weeks ago, Dr. Dieter Malm, a Swiss orthodontist with an obsession for automatons. He had spent an hour studying the music box before acquisition, murmuring about mechanical precision. She located his business card in the guest book. Lena Googled him. The orthodontic practice was legitimate, but Malm also sat on the board of Helvetic Bioprosthetics, a competitor of Klugenbauer's joint design. Motive, meet opportunity. Frida rubbed her eyes. "We need proof. First, we need to avoid being arrested for stealing evidence. Lena smiled sheepishly. Frida smiled back despite fatigue. Then we find Malm's hiding place. Next morning, they returned the box to the police before Dietz noticed its absence. He remained unaware, engrossed in forensics. Freed from guilt, the women followed their hunch to Prenzlauer Berg, where Malm rented an attic apartment overlooking Kollwitzplatz. Lena carried a violin case, Frida a clipboard. They posed as researchers collecting oral histories about toys, a plausible pretext. Malm answered the door in slippers shaped like polar bears, his hair a silver wave. "Ah, the ladies of the museum," he said in accented German. "Come in, please." His living room resembled a clockmaker's workshop. Brass gears filled trays, and a half-disassembled automaton monkey sat in a dentist's chair. The only modern object was a matte black safe against the wall. As Frida interviewed him about childhood playthings, Lena unpacked her violin, claiming she wanted to illustrate musical cues used in automata. She performed the waltz from the music box, first the original, then the variation. Malm's pupils shrank, his fingers twitched. "Beautiful," he said hoarsely. "My grandmother owned a similar box." Lena replayed the passage containing rests, emphasizing them with a deliberate pause. Malm glanced at the safe. Frida pretended to jot notes, but her heart raced. If Malm attempted to open it, they'd have confirmation. Instead, the Swiss rose. "Excuse me a moment," he said, heading down the hallway. The women exchanged looks. On the violin's underside, Lena had taped a dictaphone. She peeled it off and approached the safe. It required an 8-digit code. Lena whispered, "Try every other digit, starting with the first, 132-65104. Frida typed. The safe beeped red. "Alternate starting with the second, 3165046. Another red. Footsteps returned. Frida spun away as Malm re-entered, smiling politely. "I've brewed coffee, Shumli, you will like." He poured cups. While he spoke about Swiss toy fairs, Frida noticed a small metronome on the shelf, set to 120. On its face, letters had been written under numbers C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and under each letter a second digit C2, D4, E6, F8, G0, A01, B3. Her pulse quickened. The scheme converted musical notes to even numbers rather than simple 1-7 mapping. She nudged Lena's foot. The waltz's opening notes, C, D, G, rest, translated to 2408, or perhaps C2, D4, G0, rest 8. It fit the 8 numerals exactly. They needed the sequence. First phrase, C, D, G, rest, F, E, G, C. Translating 2408, actually F8, E6, G0, C2. So the set, 2408-8602. Variation phrase would offer the next 8, but maybe only the first mattered. Malm excused himself again to answer a phone call. Frida seized the moment, entered 2408602. The safe clicked green. Inside lay a stack of patent documents and a gold money clip bearing Kranz's initials. Lena photographed contents with her phone, then relocked the door as Malm's voice neared. They finished coffee quickly, thanked their host, promised to send free tickets, and left. On the sidewalk, they leaned against a lamppost, adrenaline draining. "What now?" Lena asked. "Now we inform Inspector Dietz," Frida said, "and hope he forgives us." Dietz did not forgive them immediately, but the photographic evidence spoke loudly. A judge issued a warrant that afternoon. By evening, police recovered the patents and arrested Malm at Schönefeld Airport. Kranz, located in Zurich, faced extradition. 2 days later, the museum reopened its Weimar exhibit. Reporters thronged the foyer. Frida positioned the music box beside a sign describing its role in the Great Berlin Melody Caper, carefully omitting any mention of borrowed evidence. Lena tuned a child-sized zither nearby, cheeks rosy with success. "Do you think we'll be asked to solve more crimes?" she asked. "I think we'll be asked to follow the rules more closely," Frida answered, though she was smiling. A hush fell as the first visitors approached the glass. Frida wound the crank once. The waltz poured forth bright and guileless, cleansing the room of tension. Children swayed, parents sighed. Frida listened to the tune that had guarded secrets of greed and betrayal, and she felt something like gratitude. Toys, after all, had always been mirrors. They reflected innocence, but they also reflected the cunning of those who misused them. What mattered was the listener, whether she heard only pretty notes, or whether she heard the pattern hidden beneath. Frida closed the vitrine and turned to greet the next school group, ready to tell a story true enough to spark wonder, yet tidy enough for comfort, a perfect ending for a cozy mystery nestled among Berlin's vintage toys.